You know what? I think we need to talk about this because it's just so weird. It's also pretty awesome that we can know anything about it at all. And it's not just some rogue planet or dwarf planet out in the boonies of our solar system. It's a large moon of the planet Saturn. But even though it's so close to us in the grand scheme of things, it's still a bit of a mystery. We don't know everything about it. There are still plenty of questions that remain. There's also another thing that makes it a bit different. It's currently smashing into Saturn's rings. Iapetus is crashing into the rings of Saturn. If that doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will. So let's get started. Let's start with the elephant in the room. What the heck does it look like? Why does it look like it vanished? This is something that really confused astronomers when they first saw it. Iapetus was discovered by the Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens in 1671. At the time, telescopes weren't super powerful, so all they could see were a few small moons around Saturn. He noticed something odd. One of them seemed to disappear from one day to the next. They had no idea what was going on. It would appear, then seemingly vanish without a trace. For all they knew, this moon could have been destroyed in space. This confusion only lasted for about 100 years, until the French astronomer Jean Nicole mapped its orbit. In 1787, he figured out what was happening. It wasn't disappearing. Its orbit was taking it behind Saturn's rings and out of view. It would emerge on the other side, appearing brand new and shiny. So that's half of it. But why does it even have this dark side in the first place? Well, there are some pretty good theories. The most accepted idea is that it's covered in ice. That's not too surprising. After all, it orbits very far away from the sun. The cold temperatures allow water to exist in its solid form. Some astronomers believe that the ice is actually a thin layer covering a rocky surface. This is based on some of the observations of its gravity. If it was pure ice, it wouldn't be as dense as it is. So there must be some rock mixed in there somewhere. The ice would have formed when some debris from the rings of Saturn coalesced and made an impact with Iapetus. This debris would have been mostly hydrogen and helium, which would have created a sort of atmosphere around the moon. Over millions of years, these gases would have frozen over and created the icy crust that we see today. Now, the reason why it S only on one side is because that S, the side that faces away from the sun. The other side gets hit by sunlight, so it never freezes. But it's not just the weird color of this moon that makes it interesting. There's also some seriously tall mountains. These peaks are located around its equator and they're massive. Iapetus's equatorial radius is about 1,400 kilometers. By comparison, the Himalayas are around 3,000 meters tall. The tallest peaks on Iapetus are over 10 times larger than the Himalayas. That's some serious height right there. Now, we do want to note exactly how tall they are, because we haven't been able to map their heights very well. But we do know that they're massive. The question is, how did they get there? The prevailing theory right now is that these mountains used to be part of Iapetus's core. Back when the moon was forming, it had a lot of heat inside of it. This heat would have melted the rocky material and separated it into layers. The densest stuff would have sank to the bottom and formed the core. The lighter stuff would have floated up and made the mantle, and the lighter stuff would have gone all the way to the surface and formed the crust. Eventually, Iapetus would have cooled down and solidified. The outer crust would have shrunk faster than the inner crust, causing some major stress. When that stress got to be too much, it released suddenly, causing the crust to buckle and fold. The result was the massive mountain range that we see today. But just to be clear, that's just a theory. We've got a lot of evidence for it, but ultimately, we can't be sure. We need more data and more observations before we can say for sure. Now let's move on to the third interesting thing about Iapetus, its orbit. You might remember me mentioning earlier how Jupiter's orbit takes it behind the rings and out of sight. That's true, but it's only part of the story. Its orbit is actually really wanky. Most of Saturn's moons orbit the planet in a relatively flat plane, but Iapetus's orbit is tilted by about 15 degrees. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality it's pretty major. All of Saturn's other moons orbit it with less than a 3-degree tilt. So why is Iapetus so different? Well, there are a few ideas. One idea is that it was captured by Saturn's gravity. Maybe it was a wandering asteroid that got too close to Saturn and got caught in its gravitational pull. Another idea is that Iapetus migrated inward. Originally, it may have formed farther out in the system, but something caused it to move closer to Saturn over time. It could have been a gravitational interaction with another moon, or it could have been kicked inward by a passing object. There's even the possibility that it was formed in its current orbit. But something unusual must have happened to cause such a high inclination. Whatever the reason, its orbit is definitely not the result of any natural processes. It must have been caused by something external. Again, more research and observation are needed to confirm this. But it is interesting to note that many of Saturn's other moons also have unusual orbits. For example, Mimas is only 18 kilometers wide. It's so small that it shouldn't even be called a moon. But somehow it's locked in a 4-year-long death spiral around Saturn. Its orbit is decaying, and eventually it will crash into the planet. Whether it already has is another story. Either way, there are clearly some unusual things going on in Saturn's orbit, and Iapetus is just one example. Okay, now I want to bring up one more thing that's really important to understand about Iapetus: its rings. You see, Iapetus isn't just smashing into Saturn's rings, it's actually creating its own rings. Okay, they're not visible from Earth, so we only notice them by accident. But back in 2004, the Cassini spacecraft flew by Iapetus and made a shocking discovery. It found a thin ring round the moon that was only about 10 kilometers wide. Then in 2019, scientists noticed another ring. This one was intermediate in complexity, halfway between the simple rings around Jupiter and Neptune and the more complex rings around Saturn. But those aren't the only rings around Iapetus. Scientists think there are actually 3 sets of rings. 2 of them are opaque and only a few miles wide. The third one is the main event. It's about 3,000 miles wide and looks a lot like a faint version of Saturn's main ring. That's because it's made of ice and rock that was blasted off Iapetus by tidal forces. But here's the real kicker. Those tidal forces are slowly pulling the moon apart. It's not going to happen anytime soon. We're talking hundreds of millions of years. But eventually, Iapetus will be torn to pieces by the immense gravity of Saturn, and that will add more material to the rings. Of course, by that point, Saturn will probably be long gone. The star that we call the Sun will expand and engulf Saturn long before Iapetus is torn apart. But it's still a pretty cool thing to think about. In the end, Iapetus is a pretty fascinating moon. It has a dark side that's covered in ice, massive mountains that are taller than the Himalayas, unusual rings that are unlike anything we've seen before, and an orbit that's full of mysteries. As we learn more about it, we'll likely uncover more secrets about our solar system's turbulent past. Who knows? Maybe it'll even help us better understand our own planet. So if you want to keep learning about the amazing discoveries that are being made in our solar system and beyond, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Every week, I post a new video about the latest and greatest in space exploration. And if you want to go even deeper, check out my website. It's a great way to support my work, and it gives you access to exclusive content like my monthly newsletter, behind-the-scenes videos, and more. Plus, the people who sign up at the highest level get to attend my private live streams, where we can talk about all things space. So what are you waiting for? Head over to my website and sign up today. I promise you won't regret it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.